Hi, this is Dr. Scott Young, and today we're going to go into NESARA. Will we have 1,000 years of peace? I'm going to explain it all and give you some answers for that. Coming right up. So to set this up, one of the things that comes out in NESARA is this conversation that there will not be any wars. All the wars have to cease. So it's where the basis of the conversation comes with, because we kind of know that all wars are banker wars. When you find out the depth of it, and frankly, even I mean, I love war type of study. It's just my thing. And when you look at that, what you find is the why it started. When it kind of doesn't make sense, for instance, World War One, Korea, Vietnam, things like that, when they don't make sense, it's actually telling you something. It's telling you that there isn't like an internal feud. Now, if we go back in time, there were times where it was because of something happened between the two nations and it erupted. But the more recent wars that we were seeing throughout the 20th century, sometimes in the the 19th century, but more in the 20th, you're going to see more of those banker type of wars. And so when we look at this, we need to have these three-letter agencies have be cut off. It's because the Fed drives that. And so inside of NESARA, when we drop off, the sickos, the sicko elitist, and we drop off, the three-letter agencies, what they're going to drive, what happens is that we stop that war. But we can't just do it there. It can't just be NESARA. It's got to be JSARA. Now remember, JSARA is the sovereignty of each nation. Mexico, Canada, Australia, pick the nation you want to talk about. They should be independent of one another. I'll give you an interesting kind of example. Australia, there was an Australian writer, and I'm blanking his name out, that he did Tomorrow When the War Began. It's actually one of the better fiction series out there. And so Tomorrow When the War Began, and there's a whole book series that you can have, and the guy does such a gorgeous job at explaining what these teenagers go through, and they're invaded by China because China wants their land, and they want to separate out their land, and no one really comes to their defense. I mean, a little bit of the New Zealanders and other things, and so there's all kinds of different wars, and that's the kind of stuff that each of the nations have to be scared to get into, because if they get into that, they lose the JSARA kind of treaties. And so some people think, well, when we hear people saying, Daniel 9:27, well, that sets up this conversation with the Antichrist making a treaty with many nations, and that's not exactly what it says, because again, it's talking about the temple and the desecration of the temple. And so we get into these like, not exactly. So that's the basis of where we are. I want to share with you several websites. This first one here is Hitler's speech. And I just want to throw out a couple things. I'm going to read it from this other screen if you don't mind a little bit. But this is 1938, where he is talking through several different points. He's talking about American aggression against Germany in World War One, because in 38 they haven't really had that aggressive event that would come with Pearl Harbor. Now, we knew about Pearl Harbor happening. That's the other thing. After World War One, they were talking. He started getting into the Jewish immigration issues and the murder of German civilians and those war crimes. Now, I know there are some awakened people and truthers are talking about, Hitler was a good guy. That is not the case. You have to read Mein Kampf. And if you haven't read or even read even significant excerpts. First off, it's a bad writing. And he pulls from a whole bunch of different things. He is clearly hating on the Jewish race. So he hates those people. But he was trying to create a internal government that would run its own currency. So there's a good and bad part, and there's frankly a good and bad part in all of them. When we kind of say it's us versus them, I mean, we're the good guys coming in, that's not exactly how it works. Now, when he gets into this, he talks a little bit about, the Jewish question. He does talk about democracies. The reality is we're a constitutional republic. When people think of us, sorry, my head is itching. When people think of us as a democracy, and when people claim that, that's what the elitists have changed us into from 1871 on with their new Constitution of the people of the United States instead of the Constitution for the United States. And so when he's talking about it, I mean, democracies can be bullies. This is not, and that is, there's nothing outside of that point. I mean, he even says things like, almost 1 million pieces of dairy cows were driven away after the cruel paragraphs of a dictate imposed by democratic, humane world apostles imposed on us as a peace treaty. And so he goes on and talking about that. So that would be the Versailles Peace Treaty in 1919. That it took a little time for that to happen in. So he goes through and explains a lot of this area. And this is where he comes up with the Third Reich. And he counts out different time frames of when the Reich was occurring. Okay, so that Third Reich was supposed to last for 1,000 years. So this is one of those reference points that comes out with 1,000 years. So as we think about that, I'm going to bring up one of my banners. As we have people that say that, who of the Anons have struggled or explains things like 1,000-year movement. And so I went through all of the 17th letter drops, and there were none that said this. And so I'm going to show you more specifically on this one, because again, this is referencing the 1933 setup of, the Nazi movement. And you see this real interesting flag from the anti-fascist or the Antifa that looks exactly like it. And so this is the kind of reference. This is the 17th letter 4476. Okay. Sorry, the date would be June 17, 2020. So this would be through that summer of peace and all the riots that were happening. Okay. And it goes through and explains some different things about the Hitler regime and the American newspapers of the time, and just some of that conversation. And it talks about the events that created a political defiance in the insurrection. And so there was a depression at the time frame. They were talking about reparations, which is the Versailles Treaty. So again, we're seeing a connector. Then he talks about the MSDNC. This is actually exactly what Trump calls it, which is so fascinating that when you realize the group of the 17th letter were utilizing the same kind of wording that Trump is talking about. And they actually say that, POTUS must be removed, push years, one now. And so we're basically a year later, Trump's out, right? So then they utilize this COVID. I don't want to get into this, to create an economic depression. Seeds of that time frame, right? And it goes on and gives you, this basic point, but it doesn't say anything about this particular idea. There's another one, and I could give you that one too. There's another one that talks about, okay, this is a decent one right here that you can kind of see. 44 or 4295. people fell asleep a long time ago. They gave up control. And it talks about race versus race, religion versus religion. And then the only statement out there is this: unity creates peace. In those, in the 17th letter statement, there are statements about unity creating peace, the gospel of peace, which is directly referencing New Testament kind of statements, and there's several of those. There's peace through strength, but there is zero information of this. So again, we have, they're doing these references, and we do not have anything more than just unity through peace. So, I challenge you. Now, someone's going to try to come out and tell me about this, but I've looked through them. If you want to kind of come up with one, but again, that's fine, even if you found the absolute reference to that. Does that make the Bible unclear about its own point? Because the where we get this concept of 1,000-year reign is from the Word of God. And we get this. This is a real interesting quote. It was actually done by Victor Hugo, who did Les Miserables. And in the 20th century, war will be dead. The scaffold will be dead. The hatred will be dead. Frontier boundaries will be dead. Dogmas will be dead. And man will live. He will possess something higher than all of these: great country, the whole earth, a great hope, the great heaven. And I want you to understand, this is what they thought of. And this is what a lot of people think like. That we can kill off all the dogmas, and that basically means religion kind of points. And that's not even the case. The Millennial Reign actually has over 300 verses, Old and New Testament, mostly Old, that actually explain this. In Revelation 20, verse 1 through 3, we get this concept that at the end of the tribulation, the great day of the wrath of the Lamb, we have the dragon who is seized, taken, along with the Antichrist and the false prophet, by Michael the Archangel. It's not Jesus doing this. And he binds him up for 1,000 years, and there was a time frame of 1,000 years for the nations to have peace. So this is one of those major, powerful areas where we get that conversation. All right. So that gives you some of the background of this. So the question that kind of comes out for people: are we in the tribulation? Well, let me just talk about how we get to that point of the tribulation. You see, post-World War II, 1945, there was, before post-World War I, and the League of Nations comes into vogue. We have Woodrow Wilson, who signed the Fed into existence in December, I want to say 23rd of 1913, just almost 2 years into his term. He signs the League of Nations, and he has 2 terms, and he gets out in 20. But he's very upset at the way that the Versailles Treaty was handled. And Congress overrode what he was trying to put together on the peace plan, because really he wanted to have a lasting peace. But that's not what Versailles Treaty wanted to do. The Versailles Treaty, through the League of Nations, put heavy strictures on the Germans, which brought everyone into a hyperinflation. And then we have that hyperinflation issues, and the League of Nations was useless. Even Japan later on just said, we're not even following it. I mean, we're not going along with it. And it was useless when World War II started to break out. Post-World War II, we have Truman and the rest of them are putting together something called the United Nations. And so the United Nations, and it's maintain international peace and security. Well, does that look like peaceful kind of way of doing it? Let me pull that off the screen here. That doesn't look exactly what I would call about peace. And so what happens there, they have a big security council where there are permanent members, including Russia, America, France, England, and a few others. China is one of them. And then they have other ones who are involved, so they can all vote in different ways. But again, it's a joke. It's a literal joke in there. And then they have their peacekeeping force. Now think about that for a second. You um, you're a force, an international force, and you're trying to keep peace, but through war. It doesn't actually fit, and that's how we've thought of it too. Because even the 17th letter talks about unity through peace or strength through peace, and of course that is how it happens from a human standpoint. And this is just, I mean, when you realize how bogus it was, if it really worked, how come there were more wars in the 50s? And I mean many wars, and most of those were civil wars of countries breaking away from different blocks of countries with that, or overall creations like Czechoslovakia starts breaking up further and further. So there's so many wars, and you got Korea, you've got Vietnam later on, and we have every war that can kind of happen all the way through the UN. So has the UN worked? And the answer is no. Okay, so that plan just never works. Now, I'm not going to get into this one because I really don't want to, touch on truthers too much. But I will say this one truther that was bringing this up. She said she read the book of Revelation 3 times and didn't understand it. Then she read it backward from, the chapters of 22, 21, and went all the way backward. And so she kind of came up with this one point. There's a new heaven and new earth where we have new bodies. That part is correct. And then she kind of goes, well, there's a Gog and Magog battle, which is in Ezekiel 38 and 39. But yet that doesn't follow. Anyone who kind of feels that way is basically missing the point. Gog and Magog battle there is a very interesting caveat in Ezekiel 39 where it stipulates that they will kill off all the people that are coming against the Jews in the eastern mountains of Israel. And what happens there is that they use the fuel for 7 years. Well, if you're at the end of the Millennial Reign, why do you need fuel for 7 years until you get into the new heaven and new earth? I mean, and when you look at that is Revelation. She's talking about this from Revelation 20 and 21. Now, what people get confused by, so I'm going to pull this off the screen for just a second. What people get very confused about this is that Satan is in the abyss along with his demons for 1,000 years, and he's held there. At the end of that time frame, the people that have been on the planet for that 1,000-year period of time, they have Satan who rises up, and there's a real interesting one. It says Gog. Now, Gog, if you read in Ezekiel 38, it's Gog and Magog, and Gog is a leader. But then Gog dies near the end of the time frame. So is it really Gog? No, it's a spirit of Gog. So these are two separate events. And this is a warring spirit, and this is no different than the first beast or the second beast of Revelation 13, verse 1. What do we have that as? Well, let me give you a better way of thinking about this. It says that the first beast will come from the sand of the seashore. And so that is the Antichrist. But Antichrist is a guy. The first beast comes into him and, gets him part of war. Now, when you also read a little bit later, you have the false prophet who has the second beast in him, and he comes out of the sea. which means that they come out of obscurity. You don't know who they are. I promise you, you can go watch this stuff and you go read what the word says. You will not know the identity of him. 2 Thessalonians 2, 2 through 12 indicates that the man of lawlessness cannot be revealed until the Holy Spirit is taken out of here. The Holy Spirit hasn't been taken out. If you have the Holy Spirit, he's not been taken out. That's the point. Okay. So we have lots of misunderstanding that kind of comes up here, and I'll bring this back up on the stage. So we have this big war, but that is not the same exact war. And then we have this millennial reign of Christ. And, okay, I can deal with that part. And then we have this other weird battle, and they're talking about Armageddon. Now, Armageddon is listed out in Revelation 17, 18, and 19. And that's a last battle. And they say, destroying the new world order or the beast. Well, the new world order isn't the Antichrist. The new world order is a type of beast. And she goes back here and says, the Great Awakening is now. So the Great Awakening, which leads us into this final battle. And I go, okay, I hear you. I understand what you're saying, but here's the problem. And this comes up here. Are we in the tribulation? Are we? Well, here's the problem that we have when we come up with this. I'm going to bring this up here on the screen here in a second. Let's bring up this one. So I'm going to pull this off the stage here, stop sharing for a second. And it's going to take me a second here to do this, because I had to pull it off there and kind of bring it up here. So, okay. So while this isn't perfect on this, and it's not as easy for you to see, maybe, I'm going to try to move this up a little bit more. And we have a couple flaws in this that I'm trying to fix. There's like some lines in here that we're fixing. This is a tribulation judgment timeline that we're developing, and we're just finishing some of this one point. But you have to ask yourself these questions. Are we in the tribulation? Well, the tribulation starts with a 7-year time clock that's at Daniel 9:27. See, the Antichrist gets revealed as the first seal because Jesus introduces him. And that first part of the time frame, we have the 144,000 Jewish evangelists that come up. These are young men who've never had sex with a woman. And then we have the second seal, a war on heaven, war on earth, the third seal, a famine, and then we have the fourth seal and fifth seal. The seals go all the way through, the trumpets go from the second half of the tribulation, and then the bowls are the last 30-ish days with that too. So what happens is that I would say to you this: are we in the tribulation? And I'd say, well, what biblically hasn't happened? Well, let's just go over here to the second seal. I'm going to see if I can make this a little deeper for you to read so it helps you out. Really, there is these are trifecta kind of seals. The second seal is a point of war. Then there is the third seal, which is famine, which more people will die, and the fourth seal are a quarter of the planet that would die. The estimated thing that Jeff and I have done, Jeff Swanson, who he and I both worked on this kind of thing, the estimation would be 1.8 billion people. Now let me ask you a question. Has there been a quarter of the planet killed in one war? If the answer is no, then we haven't been in the tribulation. Okay, let's do another one. The first trumpet has hail and fire that burns up a third of the planet, meaning more the green grass and a third of the planet. Have we had that? Nope. Have we had the second trumpet, a volcanic eruption, a tsunami that kills off a third of the shipping lanes? No, we haven't had that. We haven't had the third trumpet, a third of the water's going bitter. We haven't had the fourth trumpet, a volcanic, kind of cloud that hits into the ocean, where we have a release of these really demonic beings. And then we have a darkening of the planet. So that volcanic eruption would create a darkening of the planet. A third of the night and a third of the day is darkened in that point. You're already seeing that kind of point that we kind of come out there. Have we had the fifth angel, or excuse me, the fifth trumpet, where we have, this is what I call the zombie trumpet, where people can't die for 5 months. Tell me when that's occurred. The sixth trumpet, have we had that one? Where another third of humanity, maybe 1.5 billion people have died. If we haven't had the 1.87 and we haven't had a third of humanity dying, then we've got a problem here. Let's go forward. People ask these questions all the time. Have we had the mark of the beast on every single person? You would die if you don't get the mark of the beast. Have we seen the martyrs that would die from this? And then people having sores on their body, and then we'd have all the seas turning to blood and all the rivers turning to blood, and now the sun scorching, and we have a complete darkness that would happen in real Babylon. That's not New York City, the real Babylon out there. Then we would have the Euphrates River going dry. Have we had the great earthquake? We're not there. I'm just telling you, we're not in that. So let me pull this off the screen here. We haven't seen any of those things. Have we seen Jesus in the cloud? Have we had silence in heaven? I mean, if we're that close to the end of this thing, have we seen any of these things? And if the answer is you haven't seen it, then I'm sorry to that truther who believes that she read the Revelation 3 times, and on the fourth time she finally figured it out. I'm like, I've been through Revelation so many dozens of times, it's in the hundreds, okay? And most prophetic people, if you talk to them, and I interact with quite a few of them, not one of them haven't read Revelation hundreds and hundreds of times. If you've read through the Bible, I would say to you, there's 650 verses that we're not there yet. And we have to accomplish that. Even in Matthew 24, it says that if the days were extended, no flesh would survive. We're not in that kind of time frame. If we haven't had that, we can't be in that. So what I will say to you is this, and the answer is they're making all kinds of booming noises out back. What I would say to you is this, is that we're not in 1,000-year reign even after the NESARA comes on. I mean, we're going to have an EBS, and then we're going to have the NESARA points. It is going to be a pre-tribulational viewpoint. So that would be several years. I do not know her name, and my wife is going to get this one for you, but and we'll put it on the Telegram channel. But the reality is that, and there's this one woman, she does a really nice job showing how we're not in the tribulation. And frankly, we haven't been. And we still have the tribulation off a ways. And as I showed you on the screen here, we've got a lot of work out there. I mean, there's a lot of things that the Bible is going to accomplish when we have that. Now, people ask me about this. I mean, have you had it ready yet? Again, I've got lines on the screen on this little thing on my proofs, and I got to get those fixed before I, would release it out to you. So we will have that up on the website, and you can go drscottyoung.com to do that. So we're really trying to make sure that it looks good, and then I'll actually be able to build them as banners with little grommets on the side of them. So it's kind of cool. I think would probably be about 35 or 40 bucks, maybe probably 40 bucks when we do that. But we still are working on that. There will be a free download that you'll have that you can go get that. That's coming up really soon. So I hope that helps you kind of see, no, we're not in the Millennial Reign. No, we're not going to have 1,000 years of peace yet. We're going to have a peaceful time frame, and it's not exactly as peaceful as you think. It's not exactly as peaceful as you think. So it's really about us expanding the gospel in ways you haven't understood. And actually, the 17th letter said it, the gospel of peace. And that is the reason for all this. That is the reason for NESARA too. So that's how I'm looking at it. So hope it helped you out. If you like and subscribe, you can go on to the drscottyoung.com. You can download even the Hope in the Last Days PowerPoint, or excuse me, timeline that you can download on your computer as well. Remember, I don't sell QFS crypto. That's just a bunch of crud. Okay. Don't get into that silliness. Okay. Thanks so much.